my favorite video game franchises of all time is Fallout. So that made easily this TV series coming to Prime Video one of my more anticipated TV series, but also one of the series that I was quite worried about. Like, you could easily mess this up because there's not really a basis of story that you have to go off of, but you can make your own story, but you still got to deliver some of the satire, the nuance that Fallout really does have throughout its entire franchise. I'm here to say that I think Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy actually landed it. I think Fallout TV series is actually good. Now, this is going to be a non-spoiler review. I'm not going to get into the spoiler talk about this, but there will be, I'm planning a podcast episode over on another channel where we're going to dive into that in full spoilers. I'll share a link down below in the comment section once that is up. But with that said, I'm definitely excited to hear your guys' thoughts on the Fallout series. So make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Hit that like, subscribe button. I definitely want to hear, are you a fan of the Fallout games? Are you not? What is your favorite one? I've been a fan since 3, but I definitely went back and played 1 and 2. But for me, like, Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas are like 2 games that I consistently play at least once a year. And I kind of enjoyed Fallout 4 for what it was, but this series has been touted as like Fallout 5 to some sense. It takes place after 4. It's a brand new adventure in California. And the show follows Lucy, a resident of Vault 33, who leaves behind the only life she's ever known to explore, toxic wasteland of Los Angeles, in an effort to rescue her father, Hank. Along the way, of course, she runs into a Brotherhood of Steel member and as well as a ghoul. And all their stories happen to crisscross paths just as you would imagine in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Now, again, that's as much as I can say about the story without getting into spoilers. There is a lot that Amazon sent over that I cannot discuss, and since I did get to check it out early, I am going to follow on those guidelines. So, as a fan, I didn't know what exactly I wanted to expect from the series, but I did have some things that I wanted to see. I wanted to see this world kind of recreated in a one-for-one live action. I wanted some good character development. I wanted a good story because I have found, at least in the Fallout series, that the stories are always decent, but never truly grabbing me, emotionally grabbing me as well. But I also wanted to make sure that Fallout was going to have its wacky, kooky, and dramatical shifts as well, because in a sense, Fallout is a satire on a lot. I mean, just Vault Boy itself with the big thumbs up is quite interesting. And as I've gotten older and as I continue to play Fallout, the game clearly has all those elements. I'm happy to say that the show really did land those spots. You see that the series works probably a little bit better for fans of the video game and clearly not as much for people who have never actually played the video game before. There's going to be a lot of things where fans are going to be able to point out Easter eggs here and there and have fun with it and clearly see that this is set into the future of the Fallout universe where certain factions and certain places are into this entire series. And alongside, though, I really needed a good story here. And I think what Jonathan Nolan, Lisa Joy, and the entire creative team behind the Fallout TV series really crafted here was something that does feel to that. It still has that satire. It's still stemming and touching onto the post-apocalyptic nature, but as well as how like corporations and how corporations in a way are still affecting the post-apocalyptic aspect of our world. Personally, for me, one of the things that really plays out in that is the way that the story is told. Now, there's 3 main areas that we really are focusing in on throughout this entire series. One is in Vault 33. There's an entire mystery kind of going on down there that is honestly like gets pretty intense. Alongside that, there's the whole wasteland and specifically following Lucy, who is a vault dweller who leaves the vault to go find her father. And what is this wasteland to her? New operation of territory, who again, she starts to run into a ghoul and the Brotherhood of Steel and all of that kind of places around in the post-apocalyptic nature. But the third piece of the story that actually really starts to tie into this is a lot of flashbacks to before the bombs dropped. And that whole storyline really surprised me in the way that they were able to tell it, as well as add a new thing to the entire Fallout lore. And some of this has been clearly developed in previous games as well, but this, as for someone who would recommend this show, I think for newcomers, that aspect, once it finally clicks in, is going to be a big, oh, wow. I was really happy to see how they were able to tie that in, how they brought it to the characters, and as well as continued the character arcs of every single one of the characters in here. And that's where I kind of want to talk about the performances, because I think Ella Purnell, who plays Lucy in here, is wonderful. She is our eyes and ears to this post-apocalyptic nature. This is new to her, new to this world, and it's great to see. Alongside that, Aaron Moten, who plays Maximus in here, he is our main Brotherhood of Steel. We are following along. Easily brings us into the Brotherhood of Steel. Personally, for me, I've always found that the army aspect of Fallout is sometimes some of the weakest, but I found that Aaron was pretty good in the role, and I liked him. I think he made the Brotherhood of Steel a little bit more interesting, based to see someone who is very conflicted with their ideas and feelings of the Brotherhood of Steel. Alongside that as well, Walton Goggins is phenomenal as the Ghoul. There's a lot more to his character and a lot that I really want to talk about, but primarily where you see his character start at the start of the season to the very end of it, I was very impressed with, and truly enough, was engaged the entire way through. Moises Arias and Dave Register, I think both their characters are quite interesting, and specifically what they're trying to do within the vault and what you start to learn about that. Again, not more I can say in that without getting into spoilers, but I found that this entire series has a lot of great stuff in it, and primarily in the way that it builds up its characters and the world of Fallout. Now, there might be some things in here that may kind of just feel like, oh, we're going over here for like really no reason, but it is setting up and exploring the post-apocalyptic nature and the world itself a little bit more. And I think as this series and this game has always been about, is exploring the post-apocalyptic, seeing how this wasteland is, seeing how war never changes, and it truly is the same thing as if the world wasn't destroyed or if the world was. And all these different ideas, all these different towns, all these different people that you meet along the way, whether they're big or small to the story. That's one of the things that I was always impressed with, was the vastness of this world. And one of my favorite things in Fallout was always the exploration. For me, it's never been about where the story ended at. It was always, how did I get to that point? And I found that what Jonathan Nolan really much did as a creative mind in here was craft a story that did feel like I was legitimately playing the game, but more watching it and going to these certain areas with different characters, finding these different avenues, exploring different things, and feeling like I was locked into this world. And even to a point, having certain choices, where I remember in Fallout, like, you'd have certain choices. Like in Fallout 3, you have the choice to like either blow up an entire town or not. And sometimes in the series, you do feel like, you know, while you can't make that choice, it does bring up those thoughts of, well, what would you do? And there is one big thing towards the end of the series, specifically in the finale, that made me have those same thoughts, which is nothing that I would have ever expected from this series. I expected something that would go more into the Westworld territory, where it's a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more character piece, and kind of trying to be philosophical. But while the show definitely starts to hit some of those satire moments and tries to go dramatic, I was really impressed with how they still added in the essence of fun. And that, again, it is about the journey to getting there, to exploring this wasteland, to exploring the outer of this, and being a new person to this entire area, and still able, at the very end, to craft an idea of, like, wow, that's some ballsy shit and some crazy stuff as well. And all along the way, there's some phenomenal action scenes and some phenomenal blood and guts. I mean, this has to go down the most gory and visceral shit I've ever seen in a series. Like, right up there with The Boys in terms of, like, explosions, and, like, you see a bullet shoot into someone's head and their head just pops off and explodes. It's nasty, and I loved it. And there's a lot to love in this series. In fact, the more and more I talk about it, the more and more I think about it, the more impressed I am by the Fallout television series and what they were able to accomplish here. And I really want to talk spoilers, and I'm going to refrain from it. But this is where I do want to get down to some of my issues with the series, so let's jump into that. So first off, one of the mixed aspects I have with it is the tone is kind of all over the place. I think some people will really like that and some people won't. Didn't personally bother me, but sometimes it'll go from like talking about like, what's your semen count, to someone's head exploding, and then all of a sudden it gets very dark and dramatic. I shit you not, like, this is a real thing, and it's very much whiplash at times where I'm like, what the fuck? But that is how Fallout has always been in my personal eyes. So that is one thing to keep in mind. It is very dramatic at times, very satirical at times, very hilarious at times. It's just going to be a whiplash back and forth on that. Not going to work for everybody. It worked for me. Didn't bother me all too much. As well as there is a lot of Easter eggs in here that I, as a fan, was very, very happy with. Might leave some people in the dark where they're like, wait, what's this Anchorage, Alaska shit? that's some stuff that, as a fan of the games, I'm really happy they like touched on, and there's certain lore that I'm like, oh, that's really cool that they placed in there. But I wanted a little bit more. As a fan, the one thing I do think that is missing from this is certain enemy types and certain creatures that I felt were like a big omission. There's definitely some teases to them, like into the future, like if we get a season 2, and I will tell you this right now. The ending of this series, my jaw fucking dropped, and I just jumped up and screamed of excitement. When you see the ending of this series, I think if you were a fan of the games, you were going to be so excited. And if you're not a fan of the games, you're going to be like, huh, that's interesting. You're going to definitely want to know what's going to happen next. But that made me really, really happy. And the whole finale really brings it together. So if you're wondering, like, am I going to get all my questions answered? For the most part, yes. And it sets it up perfectly for a season 2 to where you're like, oh, all my questions answered, but I want to see where it goes next now with these characters. It fits so well into the Fallout world on that. Again, I'm supposed to be talking about my issues, and I really do wish there were certain enemy and creature types that I wish they would have infused into here. I imagine a season 2 we'll probably see those. The last bit, sometimes the pacing is a little bit over the place as well. For me, I found myself getting a little bit tad tired at certain points where, like, some episodes I was like, oh, like, this is a pretty good pacing, and other times I'm like, I don't know. Like, the first episode I would probably give like a 7 out of 10 to, because it's trying to set up all these different characters, and it's like one character you're very invested in, and then it goes back to this other one, you're like, I don't really care for this story. It's always the risk with having 3 big characters in here and having to divvy up time to each and every one of them. And sometimes throughout the entire first season, you will feel that, where one episode you'll be like, oh, this is very interesting with what this character is doing, but this one's kind of a little bit boring. Then like the next episode, it's like that other character is now doing something interesting and I want to see more of that, but the other one's kind of doing something boring as well now. It all does connect. And that was the one thing that really satisfied me as a fan. And I think the Fallout TV series is going to satisfy a lot of people out there. This is a series that I personally was very excited for, but also very nervous for, because you never know how it's going to turn out with video game adaptations. And for here, I think they crafted and made the right choice to just make a Fallout 5, take the ideas of Fallout and basically just craft your own story around it. But they nailed the satire, they nailed the tone and the wackiness of Fallout, and they introduced new characters that make me interested to see more of them in future installments. I think where this season ends, it gets me excited to see where they can possibly go with a season 2. As a fan, I think a season 2 honestly could be better, specifically with what they set up and what was introduced by the end. All my questions basically got answered, and I was happy for that. There's a mystery along the way. There's going to be a lot of things that you're like, I wonder how this is going to go, and I promise you everything connects by the end. I'm a big fan of the Fallout TV series. I found it to be actually good. And with all that said, I'm going to give this series a B+. Little nitpicks here and there, but I definitely can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. So leave your thoughts down there, hit that like and subscribe button, and of course, until next time, stay classy.